use my regular YouTube. I tried to use the actual the party YouTube channel, but it was a mess.
No, it's fine. Sometimes I get like people guess. Not that my name is the easiest to pronounce, but like it's a guessing game for me to get it right, and then they correct me on live air.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh. All right. Well, I guess we're live right now. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this live episode of In Lay Terms. I'm your host, Payman Ascari, and we're still setting everything up. I'm here with Keith today. How's it going, Keith?
Awesome. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. You said you're in your backyard. It looks pretty beautiful. Whereabouts are you right now?
I'm in St. George, New Brunswick.
Cool.
Yeah, which is down along the South Shore. So
You're on the other side of the country.
yeah, that's right. That's right. You are in
Um,
Edmonton, right?
Myself? No, I'm in. Technically, I'm in Whistler, but just Vancouver.
Oh, okay. Complete
Yeah,
opposite end of the country.
yeah, from coast to coast, I guess.
Nice.
All right. So to bring people up to speed, I talked to your friend and party member Francois, and that's
Yep.
how we were put in touch. You were blowing up the comment section, and thankfully we managed to get you back on this time in person.
Yeah, yeah. It was great. Yeah, we formed the Libertarian Party of New Brunswick. Um, I was elected leader in June with our first conference or our first convention. Yeah, and it's been a roller coaster since. We all went into this with very little experience to no experience. Um, and yeah, it's been a roller coaster. We've had way more support than we expected, so that's always good. Um, so I've been busy. I work a 50-hour a week job, and then I decided to start a political party. So
What could go wrong?
yeah, that's right.
So you're the president. I'm trying to map this out. You're the leader, and then Francois is the president.
Yes, yeah, I'm the leader of the party. Um, so I'm like the way our party is kind of built. I'm kind of the spokesperson, I guess, of the party. Uh, Francois makes like the political decisions as well as the rest of the board. We have like a steering committee that kind of controls things for the next 18 months until we have everything in order and stuff like that. But yeah, so he's our party president. We're both founding members. Um, yeah, it's been exciting for sure.
How did you guys meet? Do you guys have like a local support group, and then you're just like, well, let's just start a political party?
Um, in the comment section on Facebook, believe it or not, it was during the COVID hysteria, and him and I had similar beliefs, and we found each other debating the same people, basically in the comments of Facebook. That's kind of how we met, and then we met up a few times, and where we don't agree on everything, but we agree that the government is way too powerful, way too bloated, way too wasteful. Um, I'm a I'm more of a classical libertarian. He's more of a realist who just wants to find good solutions for problems, like common sense solutions. So, um, but I'm reeling him into libertarianism because I believe that it is the common sense solution. So, yeah.
All right, for us that don't know much about the political philosophy, give us a concrete example of one issue that you and Francois would differ on.
Um, Potentially, I have to think about that.
I can put the Jeopardy song on if it would help.
No, there's a few. I'm just trying to think of one right off the top of my head. One actually would be so like data collection. In his mind, there's kind of no stopping it, which he may be right. He's a little more tech savvy than I am, right? So he had this idea, or like why don't we make money for selling our own data? Like basically, we utilize what's already happening, but each person gets like a paycheck because their data is being sold anyway. And I'm more of a, that is an infringement on the right of privacy, and it should be completely stopped, right? So we haven't really debated too hard on that. He basically said, "Yeah, I'll keep those opinions kind of separate from the party," which I never asked him to do. That's just his prerogative, I guess. But yeah, there's been a few issues we've disagreed on, but we've never really pushed back on each other that much.
So no fisticuffs?
No, not yet, not yet. But we're libertarians, so it's only a matter of time.
Well, it seems like Francois is here. I lean towards technocracy and absolute freedom and openness of information.
Right.
Which is probably a summary of what you just said.
Yeah, basically.
Let me ask you about your views on. You said that it's an infringement of our privacy, so it's sort of like mining our data. Couldn't an argument be made that it's a business's right? So if I'm Facebook and you're a user, and we sign into a contract where I say I'm going to mine your data and sell it, and if you say yes, wouldn't that in a libertarian framework be acceptable?
Yep. Yeah, it would. And again, that comes more. That's more of a personal, or more of a societal problem that we have, that we don't look into those big long lists that we say I accept to, that no one reads, right? Especially now, because you can feed them through an AI that could easily break it down for you, like, what does this mean? What does that mean? So yeah, they do have the right to do that. You're correct. I'm
All
more
right.
of a, I'm more of a, I believe that people should be more responsible when it comes to that, I suppose.
Now that you're here, I'm going to use you as a free resource on libertarianism. I asked this question of Francois. So I went to a conference and they broke libertarianism down into 4 categories from, pure libertarianism downwards. The first one was anarcho-capitalism. The second one was something called minarchism. The third one was US style constitutionalism. And the fourth one they begrudgingly put in there was classical liberalism. Can you break those down for me as a non-expert?
Yeah, as best I can. So I would say anarcho-capitalism is exactly how it sounds. So there is no government at all, and the capitalism part wouldn't be enforced. Anarcho-capitalists believe that it would just naturally happen. People would peacefully trade with each other. A minarchist, which is what I am, is basically like the night watchman state. So your federal government's basically in charge of infrastructure and national defense, and that's basically it, right? Um, the most amount of governance would be at the local level. The most amount of power would be in the hands of the individual. Classical liberalism is it's an offshoot. Well, minarchism, I'd say, would be an offshoot of classical liberalism. So they all come from liberalism, right? Which isn't the brand liberal that it is now. Like Ludwig von Mises, uh, Frederick Hayek, like all these 1930s ish economists that emerged they were very religious, and they believed that everyone had natural rights, that it was immoral to be infringed upon. And then they took that to its limit, specifically economically, which was, um, if there's no victim, there's no crime. If there's no infringement on anyone else's rights, then it should be completely legal. The government shouldn't be involved in free trade at all. So classical liberalism, in my mind, would have led to somewhere between anarcho capitalism and minarchism. Um, what was the third one? I skipped over one that I was hoping to
You
remember
skipped
by the time
over
I finished it.
U.S. constitutionalism is the one between minarchism and classical liberalism.
Yeah. So, U.S. constitutionalism. So, um, the uh, the founding fathers of the United States were essentially libertarians, um, to some degrees, right? They were like they wanted to progress to the next stage of individual liberty, where there was no king, there was no top down monopoly. So they set up their constitutional republic, which was supposed to be supposed to limit the powers of the state as much as possible, and they called it the Great Experiment for a reason, because they didn't know if it was going to work, but it was the experiment to see if man could govern themselves. Um, and it wasn't the perfect experiment for sure, because we had slavery and what was happening to the indigenous population at the time. So obviously, it wasn't every man was created equal. But the U.S. Constitution, as it stands in its original form, minus a few points, was actually fairly libertarian in nature.
So first of all, apologies if there's background noise. Every time the city gets wind of me doing a live podcast, they send like every garbage truck and gardener out here to mow the lawn. Uh, the American experiment. So 1776.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
When do you think it kind of? So I would say it's definitely not libertarian now. So it started out somewhat libertarian. Where do you think was the inflection point where it started to change?
Um, there have been a few, but central banking would be one that I would point to. Once they accepted a central bank that really, when any entity can control the value of a currency or lack thereof, then it becomes not real, right? It can be manipulated a lot. I believe that right now, if we had um, like actual sound money for the last few years, we would have been there would be almost no poverty. Because like you take a cell phone, the thing I'm on right now, it's, the original ones were big, huge bricks, and they were like $10,000 to buy, right? And they've gotten cheaper and cheaper, and way better, obviously. So I believe that everything would have gone in that direction if not for inflation, which is caused by money printing, right? So yeah, so I believe that would be one inflection point, one major one, and there have been other ones that have been essentially power grabs, right? So like 9/11, World War II, basically any emergency, there's usually a power grab. Um, Sometimes they're more successful than others, but it seems like as we go on, they're more and more successful.
Yeah, I agree with that. When you say sound money, is it purely that the government should only be able to coin, so like gold back 100%, or do you think that banking, all of this should be private? There should not be any bank in the government.
Yeah, I think I think currency should be voluntary, right? So whatever two or more people decide is a medium of exchange, that can be a currency, right? So there can be competing currencies, whatever people actually hold value in, right? Um, as far as the little bit of taxing that might be acceptable, that would be, um, there could be like a silver or a gold, right? When I say sound money, I mean something that can't be um, plagiarized or counterfeited, right? So yeah, but ultimately, I believe there should be competing money, like, or uh, if you have a barter system and people in a community could have competing money. And this obviously isn't our party platform. This is just my, kind of how I see the world.
I always tell a funny story when I'm talking to libertarians. I'm from Iran, so I was born in Iran. My parents grew up on a farm in Iran, and when you're in the Middle East, you're almost half a century behind the West. So you could think of them growing up in the 1900s. They
Yeah.
paid zero taxes, like no property tax, no sales tax, nothing, and they didn't have a money system. They used tally sticks for all their bazaar exchanges. So it's pretty cool. Like they were technically anarcho-capitalist.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I mean, people in the West now, especially, I find they're very, they, they almost, it's almost an immediate fallback to, oh, they should do this and they should do that. It's like more of a demand. This is one reason why Francois decided to have the French name be the individual responsibility party, because it gets the message across. Like, yes, we want small government, but that also comes with individuals actually taking responsibility, right? So to have an anarcho-capitalist society or a minarcho-capitalist society, um, you need people that are responsible, that can run their own lives and help each other, right?
No, I agree. This is the one ugly side of freedom that no one talks about is personal responsibility. So if anyone's ever like if you've ever lived on a farm, sure you don't have to deal with the strata for your water, but if your water goes out in the middle of the night, you got to go out to the pump house out in the middle of nowhere with a flashlight and try to get it to work. Same with your septic. So
Yeah, that's right. Very different world.
yeah, but it's a sense of just like the freedom that you're not beholden to like an incorporated area and you
Yeah.
gotta get to City Hall to complain about something.
Yeah, and there's actually a yearning for that now. It seems like people homesteading and wanting to be as self sufficient as possible, and then those people realize, like, they're almost going through a revisiting of history. Right? They become really self sustaining, and then they realize that, okay, well, I want this and this, and I have so much of this, and then they trade with their neighbors, or their pods or whatever, and it almost becomes like a return of the barter system in that sense.
Do you know the
We'll see.
if I say the phrase the without papers pizza guy, do you know him? Jesse Johnson, I believe.
No, I don't think so. No.
He was out here in the West in Calgary. He had a restaurant and he would serve people regardless of vaccination status, and they sent an undercover and they took him out. So he's got his own pizza place now in BC, and it's barter based. If you take a vodka bottle or a silver coin, he'll give you a pizza, like a full one.
Cool. Oh, I think I do know who you mean. I think I remember them coming in on horseback when they had a big crowd in the parking lot, and then the RCMP came in on horseback and
It could
something.
be. I'm not familiar with that story, but he just had a really popular restaurant in Calgary, and they send undercover Alberta Health Services like agents, almost like it was a CIA operation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
asking if to see if he would ask for vaccination status.
exactly. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
crazy.
So they took him out.
What a crazy
Uh,
time we lived through, huh?
yeah. Why don't we talk about that? You mentioned that you and Francois, when you met, you had similar opinions on COVID. What are those opinions?
Um, well, essentially, that people should be free to do as they wish. I know the public safety argument, which is, it's always the argument, right? That, you know, oh, if you cough and you're not vaccinated, or if you're not wearing a mask. Um, but again, if you take that to its extreme, cars would be abolished. If we're doing all this stuff in the name of safety, then you will. If you're able to put that first, then you're able to essentially say that people don't have rights, right? Because if you say, oh, you have rights unless X is the case, then then rights don't actually exist, right? They don't really know the meaning of the word. They're privileges ordained to us by the government. Um, so in the beginning of COVID, I didn't really know what was what, like most people, right? I think most people, like, they didn't know if it was a biological attack or what, right? Or how bad it was. People were, remember people would send me videos of people like collapsing in the streets in China, like they would just fall over. Uh, I assume that had nothing to do with COVID because I don't remember any of that later on. But um, and then eventually it was right after the 2 weeks when they just kind of ignored the 2 week thing, and they just because I've been kind of familiar with media manipulation before that, right? Um, so when they immediately switched to, if it saves one life, when a day before that they said, you know 2 more weeks or 2 weeks to flatten the curve, we're on day 13, and then all of a sudden it was just, if it saves one life, we'll lock down for 2 years, like they um so that's when I knew that there was something else going on. I didn't know exactly what. um I um I wore the mask. I didn't believe in the mask, but the town I live in has a lot of elderly people, and I essentially rationalized that if I went into a store and I caused some old lady to have a panic attack because she watches CBC, then it wasn't really worth the message I was going to send, right? Um, but I agreed that they should have been, like, the masks were useless, and even if they weren't useless, uh, if a store demanded it, then fine, that's their private business. But for it to be mandated by the government was obviously something that I disagreed with. And then, of course, the vaccine regime, that was crazy. That turned us all into second class citizens. Anyone that didn't get it, so that was that was one of the craziest things I lived through as it was going on. Like, to think that I might not be ever be in a restaurant again, or I might not ever be you know take my kids to trampoline park that we always went to. Yeah, so that was a little crazy for me. So that kind of lit a fire under me to kind of speak more about libertarianism, which I had been a libertarian for a long time before then, since the Ron Paul campaign. Um, but I wasn't very all that vocal, I guess.
I'll share one story that's reading the we did this to protect the vulnerable. However, this is from Robert Bard. He's actually running for the People's Party as well. We did this to protect the vulnerable, however, caused more sick people in doing so. So that's another issue. That's agree with that, Robert.
Yeah.
What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, my I was living in an apartment in West Vancouver. There's a lot of elderly people, and there were, in this apartment in particular, there was a lot of elderly women and well, I guess men too. So I put my mask on. One day, I put my mask on. I walked to the front entrance door to get out of the building, but like I didn't step out and then take my mask off. I took my mask off and stepped out, and this old lady just came running after me. She got right in my face, ironically, and she started screaming at me, like, why did you do that? And it's very difficult as like a young man. Well, I'm not that young, but I'm not that old either. I can't yell at an old lady, right? So I had to apologize. But I see that, like, the elderly are going insane, and there's nothing I can do to confront that. That was a big challenge for me.
Yeah. that was, and I mean, they're older, right? Everyone has a soft spot for them. Like everyone, like you don't. It's hard to just hate an elderly person. But and they watch TV, right? They're at home. They watch CNN or whatever, right? So they're just being terrified every day. Um, so yeah, I agree that was difficult. I worked with some older ladies that were really, really afraid. Um, by the end of it, they were supporting the trucker convoy. So between myself and another friend of mine, we woke up a lot of them to the craziness. A lot of that is actually thanks to Tom Woods and his coverage and the guests that he had on, um, like Jay Bhattacharya, the one of the authors of uh, the Great Barrington Declaration, which was essentially a declaration by the head doctor, the head epidemiologist of Harvard, Stanford, and Oxford. All wrote the Great Barrington, the Great Barrington Declaration, and essentially said that this is not like this is going to cause way more harm, way more deaths. You're terrifying people. Locking them up is going to kill their immune system. Like they broke it all down, right? So Tom Woods, he had him on, and then he had a bunch of other experts on that were, against the grain, all the canceled people, basically. And it wasn't like, you know, it was something that could be digested by someone who was not awake, right? So it wasn't like a Alex Jones video, right? So people are going to look at that and be like, okay, this guy's crazy. Like, um, it was more like the news, right? There's this, older gentleman. He was talking about data and all this stuff, right? So that was really easy for them to digest. So I was essentially waking him up to the COVID stuff with Tom Woods' video and his charts. Um, yeah, I got sidetracked. Sorry.
That's all right. I got another question for you on the issue of rights. Like,
Mhm.
why don't you first define for us, like, what are rights to you?
um, what is a right? A right is essentially, I believe it's endowed on us by our Creator, um, and it's something that cannot and should not be taken from us. Um, a definition I have a hard time putting into words, but essentially you have a right to, like, I can name rights, what I believe rights are, but a definition is a little harder for me to put into words. But um, you have a right to your life and your freedom of movement and expression. Um, you have the right essentially to do whatever you want, as long as it doesn't interfere with anyone else and what they're doing, against their will. You have a right to the fruits of your labor. So anything you build with your hands, you have a right to that, unless you contract it out, right? Um, you don't have a right to anyone else's labor, which is why I do believe that taxation is a theft, because some people want a popularity contest. They get to steal 40% of your money and do whatever they want with it, right? Um, yeah, that's the best I got right now, I guess.
No, it's good. You did better than I would have, and I wasn't expecting a textbook answer, but I have a follow up question for you. Like,
Yep.
does anybody have any rights? Like, is there any place on the planet where we have a single right that the government can't take away from us?
Um, they, I mean, the short answer is no. Um, and this is why I like a lot of people who just say, yeah, they're gonna become self-sustainable and they're gonna just keep away from everything. That only works for so long, right? They're gonna close the jaws more and more and more. So just doing that is basically leaving the problem for your kids, I believe. Which is why, like, I'm uncomfortable speaking on camera. I go up on stage and talk to people. It's like my nightmare. But I don't want to leave it for my kids, because it's going to be harder for them, right? And then if they leave it for their kids, it's going to be even harder for them. So, um, yeah, I think now is the time to at least try, right? I hear a story. It's in Michael Malice's book, the White Pill, and the short version is essentially, um, it's about people in USSR and how hopeless they felt. Like, they thought like that was the only world they knew, right? They woke up, they were terrified of the state. All they could think about was food. Like, all day long, it was, okay, what am I going to get for food today? Where am I going to feed my kids? Like, that was their lives, right? Um, so that was absolute despair. And then one day, the wall fell, and their entire lives changed because of the actions of a few people who weren't even really that heroic, right? They just decided they weren't going to go to work that day. They weren't going to turn on their own citizens, and like, everything changed, right? So, and I mean, like, if you look at Joseph Stalin compared to Joe Biden, they're dealing with way more competent people than we are, right? The people we're dealing with are kind of moronic, really. um, yeah. Anyway, so I think it just takes some guts.
Uh, I'm taking you in a direction which I think you'll be comfortable to end up in, but like what is your vision for Canada? Like I look at, like, obviously we're never going to get there in the next decade or something, but if I have a property and I want to build a house on that property, I should be able to build it however I like, within reason. I can't build a nuclear power plant, fine, but like I should be able to build it. And if my neighbor says you're blocking my view, he's welcome to take me to court and claim like nuisance. But we shouldn't have zoning, right?
No. Um, so um, I do agree with some like forms of regulation when it comes to tapping into lines, because, like, so I took plumbing, right? And if you if you have one missing valve in your house, and you have your hose that's stuck in a bucket of, nasty water with a bunch of chemicals in it, you can kill your entire neighborhood, right? Essentially, if you're so I do believe in, if you're tapping into a system that's being used by others, you should have rules that you follow. But yes, you should essentially be able to build whatever you want on your property. It's your property. Um, Especially, I don't know what it is. It's like there. I assume pretty bad, because you guys are like China light, right? Almost. Um,
BC,
yeah, yeah.
more
Um,
or less.
yeah, like, well, actually, in a lot of ways, the Chinese have more rights than us in China, because they've kind of pushed back, right? So they've been given a little more economic freedom, which is kind of crazy to think. But when it comes to zoning, yeah, you should be able to build whatever you want on your home, or on your property. Um, right now, we have never had an earthquake in the area that I live. But now we have to have a 8-inch concrete slab, even if you have like a tiny home. It has to be you have to build on an 8-inch concrete slab because of earthquake threats. Um, so meanwhile, homelessness is on the rise every week, right? Every day, it's getting worse and worse, and yet we're making it harder and harder to build homes because of regulation, and then in the name of being safe. Like, what's more dangerous, living in a below par house, or living on a bench in a park, right? Like, it's it's kind of crazy. So no,
I I agree with that, and I don't. That's like the ugly side of regulations, because the people that pass those laws are not the ones that have to pay for them. That's you and me.
Yeah. Yeah, and they don't they never actually factor in the negatives of anything, right? They say, well, what if we didn't have this? You'd have crappy homes or this or that, right? Um, Milton Friedman had the good argument when it came to the FDA, right, or Health Canada here. They never account for if they take 10 years to approve a medicine that can save lives, all the people that died in that 10 years who could have been at least trying it, right? Because they're going to die anyway, they would have lived, right? Um, yeah, so they never account for the losses ever, and that's almost anywhere in government. Um, they always uh, they claim the high ground and then say, well, it would have been a lot worse if we weren't here, you know.
I'm reading Robert's, another one of Robert's comments. As long as government has a method to take away our rights, police or military, it is a fear for all of us. By the way, Robert's a former military guy. It takes great moral courage for leaders to give back our rights to the people. Comments.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of people talk about it. Um, Not many have ever done it or even attempted. Um, Go back to Stephen Harper, right? He talked a lot like a libertarian. If you go back and listen to his rhetoric, and then he got in there and didn't really he didn't even defund the CBC, right? And that was like his big goal, and he just could never could get it done. Instead, he sold us to China on his way out. So yeah, that's essentially the goal of any libertarian who runs for politics. Like a libertarian government is almost an oxymoron, right? Um, but I believe it's one of the branches that we have to take to help try to get back some of our freedoms.
So I know you're running provincially. I always think federally, but even provincially, the government is so big. If you come in with as a libertarian, like, where do you start? Do you just detonate the entire system and build anew, or what?
No, so we have a plan. It's like so in the same way that they took a little bit more and more responsibilities and rights away from us. You almost have to do the same thing in reverse, right? Give a little more responsibility and power back to the parents, back to the individual. Uh, I said parents because I'm thinking of our one of our platforms is essentially school choice. So it's like a voucher program. So it is socialism, but it's a little less than what we have, which is the government runs the show, right? And you don't get much in the way of choice. So at least this gives back the choice of parents who to get back involved with their families. Um, I've been. It likely won't be rolled out this time, but writing policy is actually one of my strong suits. Um, and with our province, we can essentially get rid of 3/4 of our government, and nobody will even notice, except for their income tax. Their land taxes will be abolished. There'll be like there'll be a one-time fee that you pay when you buy your land, and then that's like you don't. There's no annual land taxes. Um, yeah, and we we have 15 departments, and I can't remember exactly how many ministries, but we can cram that all into 5 ministries in the first, like in our first term, fairly easily without anyone noticing. Besides, the media will, lose their minds, but nobody watches them anyway.
I like what I'm hearing. You're running out of sunlight there, so I'm gonna ask you one last question.
Oh, I can get in my car there if you want it. It's all good.
No, it's fine. I don't want to hold you on a Friday anyway. Um, your campaign. I don't know if you've started door knocking, or if you when you talk to people and you say you're a libertarian, like what's a response you get?
Is that like a liberal?
Oh, is that
About-
that's a
yeah,
response?
yeah, about half the time. Um, Other people, they're very really curious, so I try to roll it off the tongue all at the same time. I'll say like, it's a brand new party, the Libertarian Party, and we're all about reducing government as much as possible. Like I say that all in one spiel, so then they process that, and then they're like, "Oh, okay." Um, Especially here in rural ridings, they have no use for a big a big government, and we have conservatives in power now who've only expanded it. Right? They're supposed to be the ones that small government, um, but they never ever do. So yeah,
Can I ask you about that?
sure.
It's almost a myth where everybody assumes conservative means limited government, and then when you tell them like no, they've grown the government, like what response do you get? Do they just does not compute?
Um, Sometimes they say, "Yeah, yeah, you're right. They're all the same. They're all the same," and they immediately they want to support a more local movement. Um, I I say we have three levels, and if we can get to the first level people and the third level people, we're good. So the first level people are the people that are just like, yeah, I want change, small government, sounds good, I'm in. Right? They don't care about political strategy at all. Right? And then you have like the number two people, and I don't mean that to be mean, but we have people that say that they want, um, they like what we say, but they can't split the vote, right? They don't want to, the liberals are worse or the conservatives are worse, depending, right? Because I know some left leaning people who are libertarians, right? Who are, um, like they have left leaning values, but they're libertarians. So, and then we have the third tier, which is people that understand that if all you do is not split the vote, then they're going to take your vote for granted, and they're going to keep moving away from what you value. Because if they're the only option that you ever vote for, uh, then they're going to take your vote for granted, right? So we have to kind of play the long game when it comes to that.
Yeah, obviously, I'm running for the People's Party, so we're sort of like the national punching bag for vote splitting. But I've come to realize that if you give into that argument, then you're not giving people an alternative choice, and they're literally stuck with I just call it the cartel, but like the uniparty.
Yep. Yep.
So
That's right.
it's the onus is on us to, I don't know, keep getting beaten up with it.
Yep. Yep. That's right. Um, yeah, and that's essentially the best argument you can have is to say, if that's all you ever do, they're gonna take your vote for granted, and they're gonna do whatever they want because they know that you're gonna vote for them no matter what, because they're in people's eyes, they're the least of the evils, right? Um, but they're all. It really is almost a religion. I was listening to Dave Smith just before I get on here, actually, and he said it is like a religion. Like the state to them is like, oh, if I can just get the state, it's like the ring of power. You know what I mean? Um, they're all fighting for the ring of power, and libertarians want to throw it in the water or throw it in the
Is
fire.
it Mordor?
Yeah, that's it. Mordor. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, some nerd references,
yeah. That's right.
extreme nerding. I always say to them, government is God. So I always look at it as the individual. So I give you that example of, if you have a property, you should be able to do whatever you want, build something on it.
Hmm.
And that whereas they believe in government, um, obviously we can't have people, building a factory around the residential area. So we need zoning for everything at all times.
Yep, that's right. Francois said, in my opinion, we always end up with survival of the fittest. This is why we need to keep power in check and balance in our society. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And we can only do that
Man,
on the individual level, right? People
look.
that
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, people that have no interest in politics and ruling over people. Again, it's like an oxymoron, but we're the ones that have to take the time and make a change, right?
I was talking to this morning or yesterday. I was talking to another guest, and he said that the country is almost ready for more authenticity from their political candidates, because right now they're running under the party banner,
Yeah,
and it's like a cattle brand, and they get ushered across the finish line, and these people, they're absolutely brain dead.
yeah,
Like, never run a business. They just don't have any management skills, and they're not people of good moral fiber. So
yeah. And they don't have to run a business because, like Francois's last comment there, they have a monopoly on violence, right? So they have no
right.
competition. So in New Brunswick, real quick, I know you were going to let me go, and you can probably barely see
No.
me, but real quick in New Brunswick, um, we have cannabis NB, right? Um, so our government sells weed, and we have there was a native run dispensary just north of me, and they just got raided for having basically tax free weed, right? So they're like a cartel. They can raid their competition and you know just ruin their lives, ruin their livelihood. Um, Meanwhile, they're selling. I can't remember the chemical, but they just had a huge recall because they had this poisonous chemical in their weed, and it got a bunch of people sick. And
THC.
yeah, that's it.
um, we'll keep this going. It
Terrible
doesn't
stuff.
matter if the sun's going down, but fittingly, Arnold Haino, he's also a People's Party candidate. He says people assume that the government means only government offices, but you have agencies like LCBO, Beer Store, and they're a backroom run government entity. So it kind of ties into your marijuana thing. But
Yeah,
um, Keith, are you all right? You pass out?
yeah, I'm okay. Sorry,
Um,
refilling
what
my water.
That's okay. I know I said I'd let you go, but what's your view on drugs? Like, what's your libertarian view on criminalization of drugs?
Um, so I don't use drugs. Just so everyone knows, I'm not like I don't drink. Even I drink like twice a year, maybe. I don't do any illegal drugs. Uh, but I believe that if there's no victim, there's no crime. So I don't believe that the use of um, prisons and whatnot is an acceptable way to help people with an addiction. Uh, I always go back to that experiment with the mice. Um, they always have water with cocaine and water that's just regular water, and the mice would always get addicted to the cocaine, right? And then they had another experiment where it was this huge, like the mouse had, a wife and kids, and like all these little mice, his whole family running around, and like this huge playground that made him happy, right? And he never touched the cocaine because he was happy, so he never got addicted to the cocaine. So I believe drugs are a symptom of a sick society. Um, I believe that if you're a drug addict and it causes you to rob someone, you have to pay for that crime because there is a victim, right? So around here, meth is a big one, and that causes a lot of theft and whatnot. So if there is a victim, then there is a crime. I don't believe that because you put a non-approved compound in your body that you're a criminal or that you're dangerous.
Um, for anybody that's just joining us, Keith was visible when we started this podcast.
Yeah, sorry.
but his responses are so good. I don't want to let him go. You said that if there's no victim, there's no crime. Uh, what about like excessive speeding or just speeding in general?
Um, so I think that could be, yeah. So that's like firing a gun. There always is a gray area, right? So that's like, you're allowed to fire your gun, but can you fire your gun into a crowd as long as you don't like, but it's not a crime unless you hit anybody. So there is a gray area there. I would say that's pretty, speed laws are. I'd be okay with that, um, as long as we get rid of like all the COVID cops and public safety people that walk around with 9 millimeters on their hip. Right. We'll start
Um,
with we'll start with
yeah,
that,
I see what you're
and
saying. Triage. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, triage.
Um,
But I'd be okay
yeah,
with speed laws.
I guess where I was going with that was, what do you call it? Drinking and driving. Like, it's getting to the point where you have like one beer and you could get arrested and get a criminal record, like sexually assaulted someone, but there's no victim. Like nobody got hurt.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I mean, again, it's a it's a gray area that it can be justified. Um, I think having one beer and driving home, I don't think anyone's ever killed anybody doing that. I could be wrong, but I mean, you can have zero beer and still be a bad driver. Like, um, I think if you exhibit bad driving habits, you could lose the privilege of traveling in whatever areas, right? Again, it would be a community thing. Um, I'm a libertarian, but I'm also like a localist, right? So I think if localities all agree that we want speeding um, laws here and we want no drinking and driving, then it should be respected. And again,
All right.
triage, right?
Yeah. Keith, now I guess it's time to end the episode. It's getting dark.
Yeah,
Why don't you
I'm
just go ahead?
invisible.
Yeah,
I
you're
just said
invisible.
I'm invisible.
It looks like the Blair Witch Project. I think you're old enough to get that reference.
Yeah.
Give us information on how do people learn more about you and your party.
Yeah, so our website is lpnb .ca, and I'm just going to put it in the thing here so people can see it. They can email me at leader@lpnb.ca. There we go. Yeah, and they can email Francois at president@lpnb.ca. Ask me anything you want. I love conversations. We have a brand new party, so it may take me a little bit to get back to you because I'm really busy and kind of swamped all the time. But yeah, that's basically it.
Sounds good. And Keith, if you ever want to come back, you want to send your other candidates here, or if you want to hold some sort of like mock debate, just reach out.
Yeah, sounds good. I'd love to come back.
All right, buddy. You enjoy the rest of your weekend.
I appreciate it very much.
Bye.
Take care.